Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the UBC Talks webinar about monitoring and evaluation for the sustainable urban mobility planning. My name is Ira Sibelius, and I will be your host today. I work at the Union of the Baltic Cities Sustainable Cities Commission as a special advisor, and I'm leading the project SUMPS for BSR, co-funded by the Interact BSR program. As the second host in charge of the technical side, I have a colleague, Adham Maharamli. Union of the Baltic Cities is a network involving around 70 member cities in the Baltic Sea region. It was established in 1991 and it supports smart and sustainable development of cities, especially through the exchange of knowledge and experiences. We work through 8 thematic commissions focusing on different sectors of the city life, urban planning, youth, culture, safety, to name a few. Our Sustainable Cities Commission, we work together to support the sustainable development and green transition in cities, as well as address cities' adaptation to climate change. And our secretariat is hosted by the city of Turku in Finland. In our work, we create platforms for cities to exchange experiences and equip them with the best practices and tools to progress further. We're also active in many international projects, such as the SUMPS for BSR project behind this webinar, where we are helping small and mid-sized cities to develop and apply sustainable urban mobility planning to encourage a shift towards active mobility and thus a healthier lifestyle while reducing emissions at the same time. Our UBC Talks webinar series address different topics in the regular editions 4 to 5 times a year. These webinars are open and you can always find the recordings of the previous editions on our website, and also you can register for the other upcoming webinars. About 1 year ago, we organized a webinar introducing the concept of sustainable urban mobility planning, and you can also watch that recording at our ubcsustainable.net website. In today's webinar, we are diving deeper into the topic of sustainable urban mobility planning. We will talk about the monitoring and evaluation, and highlight the integrated approach on active mobility. Before I introduce our first speaker, I'd like to remind you that the webinar is being recorded and that throughout the webinar, we encourage all participants to send your questions through the Q&A box that you can see in the Zoom panel. All the recording and all the presentations from this webinar will be available on the website of our UBC Sustainable Cities Commission next week. But now it is my honor and pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Morgan Julia, who is a researcher and consultant at Ruprecht Consult, specializing in sustainable urban mobility and urban planning with a background in urban policy. Her work advances sustainable urban mobility planning through evidence-based and integrated approaches, bridging research and practice. And she has contributed to and authored multiple SUMP reference documents and is currently working on a SUMP topic guide on cycling. And today she will share with us insights into the integration of cycling and walking as part of the SUMP development process, considering it throughout the different steps, including monitoring and evaluation. So please welcome Morgan.
Thank you very much, Eva, for the presentation, and thank you very much for having me today. I hope you can see my screen and the slides correctly, correct? So as mentioned by Ira, I will provide you today with a presentation on the integration of active mobility in SUMPs. And we first will have to agree on what is active mobility, and here we're mainly talking about walking and cycling. And active mobility is really a central way to achieve sustainable, people-centered, inclusive and healthy cities. And I will take you through the different ways of the different challenges and opportunities for active mobility, and especially in the context of mobility planning. And then we can see how SUMPs really helps systematically integrate these modes into urban mobility systems. So first, it's really important to agree on definition. So active mobility really refers to the everyday movement powered by human energy. So this includes, of course, walking and cycling, but this can also include e-bikes. And often it does not necessarily account for micromobility such as electric scooters, although this depends, of course, on how important those modes are. It is inherently sustainable with zero or low emission, and it is space efficient and it is also more accessible than other modes. It has also inherently great co-benefits as it enhances physical health, mental well-being, and it enhances physical and social interactions and urban areas. And this is why, for example, the former CEO of the European Cyclist Federation had put it quite rightly so that cycling must be treated as a fully fledged mode of transport. And this also applies, of course, to walking. Now, what is important to also highlight is that cycling and walking are means to achieve sustainable access, but they're not an end in itself. When planning for walking and cycling, the end is really to have livable cities. They are more effective when understood as a connector with multimodal ecosystems and integrating it with public transport networks, safe street design, coherent land use, planning, and really ensures that both walking and cycling really contributes to the overall accessibility and reduces our dependency on private cars. Currently in Europe, despite the progress that we have made, I think, in the last recent years, and especially after COVID-19, active mobility still receives insufficient dedicated attention. In many European contexts, measures are often packaged together, treating walking and cycling as interchangeable. And this blurring of priorities really limits sometimes the effectiveness of interventions and fails to address the unique requirements for each mode. To give you an example, in the climate city contract, so from the 100 emission cities, around 50% of pedestrian measures are also classified as cycling measures, so really combining them together. We have seen over the years many exemplary measures that really contribute to accelerating the uptake of active modes, and unfortunately those are not typical, but hopefully those can be taken up further. So we have, for example, measures that really demonstrates prioritizing people over vehicles, which leads really tangible results. So super blocks and school streets, it really improves safety and air quality, while, for example, cycling corridors ensure network continuity, while UVAR, so urban vehicle access regulations, support space reallocation by reducing through traffic and emissions in sensitive areas. When planning for active mobility, we also see some common pitfalls. The first one is in the fact that space is rarely redistributed equally, and safety remains often a concern for users. Many networks terminate abruptly or fail to connect with public transport, for example. And these are issues with also design consistencies as depicted by those pictures that you see on this screen, when the design follows the existing infrastructure rather than rethinking it. And then there's also certain barriers such as the weather, but also bicycle theft, which, for example, in the Netherlands alone, on an annual basis, bicycle theft represents around 700 million euros in losses. But also the lack of end of the trip facilities. So, for example, benches in public restrooms for walking and lockers and charging infrastructure for cycling. And this is where SUMP comes in as an opportunity. So SUMPs, I hope by now everyone knows here, really represents a key planning tool for mainstreaming active mobility in this particular aspect. They offer an integrated process from vision setting to implementation and monitoring. ensuring that walking and cycling are systematically addressed and not treated as an afterthought in the planning process. And as participatory planning is highly encouraged throughout the SUMP process, it also really planned for people and therefore prevents some of the pitfalls that we just saw before. There's great examples out there of certain SUMPs that have prioritized active mobility, such as, for example, Bologna, but also or Paris recently. Now, in more details when it comes to the integration of active mobility in the SUMP process, actually every SUMP phases should explicitly consider those active modes. During the first phase of the SUMP cycle, so during the diagnosis phase, data about desired lines and barriers, as well as current use of infrastructure, can really provide a concrete overview of the current situation. During the strategy phase, defining common visions with key stakeholders can support the feeling of ownership of those measures. During the implementation phase, considering active modes allow for providing a clearer responsibilities, but also maintenance planning within the municipality departments. And finally, but not least, monitoring and evaluation really allows to track the actual use of the active mobility infrastructure and adapt accordingly. In practice, this means different implications. The first one is that practitioners really need to plan and design measures for safety and inclusion. So the design of our streets really determines the safety and lower speeds by, for example, forcing cars to slow down. So implementing physical protection for both cyclists and pedestrians can dramatically reduce certain risks and also improve the feeling of safety. And when planning for 30-kilometer streets, for example, practitioners can really need to go beyond implementing just signage, but need to improve the design of those streets to really force cars and other motorized vehicles to speed down. And this means that, for example, there would be a lesser need to have protected bike lanes, making cycling feasible without the need to have heavy infrastructure. Inclusive design is also important as it accommodates different diverse users, children, elderly people, and those using non-standard bicycles, such as cargo bikes and so forth. Another key aspect is really to consider traffic management as a mean to reflect these priorities. So shorter waiting times and coordinated green waves of traffic lights for both cyclists and pedestrians really signal that active modes are valued within the mobility system. And universal design really ensures that infrastructure works for children, elderly citizens, and people with disabilities, which is really non-negotiable for equitable mobility. Another aspect that practitioners need to consider when planning active mobility within their SUMPs is the integration with public transport and modal hub. This is highly prominent action when planning for active modes, as it really amplifies the reach of both systems. So mobility helps exemplify the synergy by combining bus, sometimes rail, bikes, walking, and shared services in one accessible location, and supporting infrastructure for such, for example, secure parking, lockers, charging stations, really make cycling and walking a more viable choice on a daily basis. And multimodality can also look different from one city to another, depending on the needs and the built environment. So there's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all option. One city can, for example, support users to take their bike in their public transport journey and accommodate for such vehicles to be taken on board, while another city can rather propose to have more shared options before and after the public transport trip. Another aspect to consider is, of course, overcoming the barriers that we've seen before and really build acceptance. So infrastructure alone is not necessarily enough, and practitioners should really plan for people. And for example, by maintaining also year-round accessibility of such infrastructure by considering weather. I'm sure as from the Baltic regions, you're very much thinking about this, but also lighting and so forth. And public acceptance, sometimes called backlash, for example, for cycling, can also really hinder and sometimes prevent implementation. So continuous communication of the benefits combined with partnerships for education and facility provision really ensures a more lasting behavioral change. And last but not least, we really need to consider monitoring evaluation for the continuous improvement of both walking and cycling infrastructure. So robust evaluation really builds legitimacy and public trust. And for this particular purpose, both quantitative and qualitative monitoring are important, as cycling counts and perception surveys can provide combining information. And those should, of course, feed back into design adjustments to improve the use of such infrastructure. Finally, also to communicate on those results, transparency on monitoring really strengthens and supports as well as helps scale up successful solutions. Now, due to the time of this presentation, we can go into details on everything, but there's a lot of information out there that can help you go further. As mentioned by Ira, we're currently working on an SUMP topic guide on cycling, which is an update of an existing document, but there's also an SUMP practitioner briefing on walking. Both documents are available or will be available at the end of the year on the EU Urban Mobility Observatory. There's also an EU City Lab, which will be taking place in Hamburg at the end of October, which is still accessible to register. And this is part of a bigger EUI, so a European Urban Initiative activity that will build a policy lab report on active mobility and integrated mobility. We have, of course, a lot of publications available from Walk 21, from the International Pedestrian Federation, and from the European Cyclist Federations, which provides a lot of guidance, but also data and best practice. And linked to that, the Walk 21 8 Steps for Success are really key design steps to consider to make our cities more walkable. And last but not least, the European Commission has an expert group on urban mobility and particularly has a subgroup which is specifically dedicated to the implementation of the European Declaration on Cycling. They have already a few reports available on the European platform, but of course, we'll have more normally towards the end of the year. So a lot out there to help you move forward with this implementation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this very interesting presentation. And now it's an excellent time to ask questions from Morgan. So please put your questions to the Q&A box and we'll take them up in the end of the webinar. And there were also good links for further reading. So we will share the presentations and you will get all the links there. Thank you so much. And now it is time to move on with our webinar, and our next speaker is Associate Professor Marcin Włobek from the Department of Transport Market from the University of Gdansk, and he will introduce you one of the key outputs of our SAMSO PSR project, that is the monitoring and evaluation framework for sustainable urban mobility planning. The framework is designed especially for the small and mid-sized cities, acknowledging the importance of following progress on active mobility in our cities. So you're most welcome, Martin.
Welcome. Thank you for nice introduction, and I am happy that I can provide my presentation after a very good presentation of Morgan on active mobility. So I will try to make my screen available for you and full mode screen. Okay, can you see it?
It's not in full mode. Oh, now it's in full mode.
Okay. So this is agenda of my presentation. First of all, I would like to make sure very small introduction on Baltic Sea region specificity of our cities. Then very shortly and briefly on SUMP, which is well-known concept and product. And finally, we will focus mainly on the need for the monitoring and evaluation framework, as well as providing measuring progress in sustainable urban mobility planning, which is transforming goals into reality, and one slide of summary. And this all we have to squeeze in less than 30 minutes. So first part of our task, this is several ideas we got from our collaboration with cities in SUMS for BSR project, that we see that there is a big difference in organizational and institutional potential among cities in the Baltic Sea region. But making it shorter, we think that it can be easily, the active mobility could be the easiest element to implement and to monitor, because I think that active mobility, walking, cycling, to some extent micromobility, are those activities that work at every city of every size. Maybe to some extent, smaller cities and municipalities can face some challenges in monitoring evaluation. And it was to some extent founding stone of our project, that we wanted to support smaller cities and towns that faced sometimes quite complex regulations, requirements, expectations on monitoring and evaluation. Of course, we focus on transport and mobility, because regardless of city, it is usually one of the most important or the most important CO2 emission source in our cities. Here we have two different cities with different advancements on sustainability and emissions. And because Copenhagen is going to get the status of a climate neutral city this year, the transportation seems to be extremely important and still challenging sector. On the other hand, in city of Gdynia in Poland, transportation is responsible for 1/3 of total CO2 emissions, standing alone as the most important sector to be targeted by sustainable solutions and actions. So we need, in fact, sustainable urban mobility plan and sustainable urban mobility planning as a tool to support cities' efforts for climate neutrality, for improving quality of life. So well-known concept brought by European Commission, and now European Commission sees sustainable urban mobility plans as an effective tool. It is maybe not an innovation. It went into daily regular praxis of our cities and towns. Of course, when we speak about sustainable and smart mobility strategy, we focus not only today on mobility, sustainable mobility itself. We speak about sustainable mobility, we speak about smart mobility, but also taking into account climate change, war, so-called black swans phenomenon. We have to also address topic like resilient mobility, and in resilient mobility mainly means active mobility. Of course, European Commission works on other concepts and topics, and from time to time, sustainable urban mobility planning is also addressed. So revised TEN-T regulation impacted sustainable urban mobility planning. European Commission extended the concept of urban node in European Union, and in the Baltic Sea region, we have more than 1/3 of total functional urban areas, representing nearly 2/3 of its total population. So European Commission sees that each urban node determined in revised TEN-T regulation should prepare sustainable urban mobility plan with relevant set of indicators. Those indicators had to be published in the end of May this year. European Commission postponed this, but hopefully we will see them quite soon. But anyway, they still circulate around three topics like sustainability, safety, and accessibility, which means that we can expect maybe something similar to recent SUMI indicators, but I hope less complex. Anyway, it was also a motivation to start work with our project 2 years ago. So as we made a revision of different strategic documents in our cities, project partner cities, we found that SUMP-related monitoring indicators can be found in various documents of strategic and operational levels. Typical monitored areas include walking, cycling, traffic safety, public transport, emissions, air quality, or car traffic. And less popular were such areas like spatial planning, accessibility, multimodality, health, density, green areas, and fossil fuel-free fleets. And of course, limited number of indicators can be found in urban logistics and heavy freight areas, but especially heavy freight is the least dependent area for cities and towns. So of course, it is quite logic. So we need the monitoring evaluation framework to address such diversified and wide topic areas. This is logic of our project, SUMS for BSR. We are now in the year 2, going to the year 3. My task of our University of Gdańsk I represent is to think about new data collection methods for active modes and to test and validate monitoring evaluation framework. In the year 3, UBC, together with other project partners, is going to organize the training for local authorities and transferring tools within Baltic Sea region SUMP competence center. So we think this competence center would act as a platform to integrate different sources, knowledge platform, different projects, different partners into one unified platform with easily accessible and updated data on sustainable urban mobility planning. Our products. Within project, we are developing, in fact, 3 products. Of course, a framework for monitoring evaluation for sustainable urban mobility, which is evolving into general document that collects important things with certain level of general approach, but 2, I would say, practical operational documents for cities are template for the local monitoring evaluation plan and indicator selector table. Because when we speak with cities of different size from different countries, when we speak about monitoring evaluation, usually we speak about, okay, so monitoring, what type of monitoring should we provide? So initially we found that, of course, indicators are very important. On the other hand, we would like to extend the concept and to provide kind of monitoring and evaluation plan that could enable city to self-check monitoring evaluation itself. Main areas of monitoring evaluation. We found that in cities, of course, sustainable urban mobility plan or related document is important, and such documents contain very interesting indicators, in some cases quite complex indicators that can transform into challenge for the city after the document is adopted. On the other hand, this is the process of sustainable urban mobility planning, and this process never ends. That's why there is always a room to improve, to change, to think about new indicators, to modify, to simplify, to add new areas of monitoring. So when we speak about monitoring evaluation, we have to make distinction between those 2 topics. In case of monitoring, we found a lot of different elements that have to be taken into account. But finally, main tools for monitoring are indicators. And I fully agree with Morgan's last slide that we should not also focus on a quantitative approach. These qualitative elements are extremely important, but as the basic, we have to develop also a set of indicators for constant monitoring. So how to measure progress in SUMP, how to transform goals into reality. Now I would like to show you two out of three our products. They are still under development, but we are going to the end this year. It is indicator selector tool and monitoring evaluation plan template. In case of the indicator selector tool, the idea was to develop a list of different indicators. But of course, when we started to collect indicators, we collected more than 240, 250 different indicators taken from existing sustainable urban mobility plans, other strategic documents that are linked to topics of SUMP, thematic area, from different cities, from scientific papers and publications, and from our experience as scientists and consultants. But of course, it was a huge list, and cities initially had an idea that it is easy to get lost into that. That's why we started initially to segment, divide indicators into particular baskets. Those baskets brought us also to the idea that there are still too many indicators, and several indicators could pose a real challenge to the city, and especially dangerous indicators and indicators that sounds very nicely, but then we are discovering that preparing input or interpretation may bring a lot of challenges. So together with our cities and with cross-border advisory group, through the set of workshops, we start to work on those indicators. We try to evaluate them, to develop indicators, to classify indicators into 4 specific groups. We use something which I found later on, which is called Eisenhower matrix. So we divided indicators into 4 groups: indicators which are easy to collect, or data can be easy collected for indicator, and indicators which are important in the process of sustainable development of the city's transportation system. Such initial evaluation enable us to decrease number of indicators, and it was very valuable evaluation because it was done by concrete cities. Of course, then we also supported cities, project partner cities that organize local monitoring evaluation workshops. Such workshops started in March this year. In Gdynia, they have been conducted in Turku, in Jewle, in Paniewierzyce, in Cesis, and in Greifswald. And they also brought us a very wide, very vast overview of local policies, local approaches, and approaches to monitoring and evaluation. And finally, we have to test and validate set of indicators. Finally, we developed the indicator selector tool. Of course, this clustering the indicators was a quite longer process. We divided indicators into 7, let's say, baskets or topic areas like walking, cycling, micromobility, public transport, cars, shared mobility, city logistics, which is rather light freight transport, first or last mile deliveries. But we also included something which we knew already that can be very difficult for cities, a segment heavy freight transport. Part of our cities are, especially Baltic Sea region, is a region where many cities are harbor cities or cities with strong transport logistics sector. And in many cases, this heavy freight transport impacts very seriously on the traffic system, on the city daily performance. That's why we knew that this basket was the most challenging for our cities, but we try to defend its existence because we know that heavy freight transport can be very influential for many targets city sets on traffic calming, emissions, safety, but the impact of city town administration on heavy freight transport sector is very limited. Nevertheless, we think it is important to monitor it and to evaluate it. And of course, then we classified those indicators by areas of measurement like level of use, scale of development, environmental impact, impact on health, and priority for individual elements. So, of course, we don't want to show you the entire table, including 143 indicators, but it is Excel database of selected indicators to support cities of different size. It was developed over last year with collaboration of our city partners, and we validated it. As I said, we clustered it, and there is a possibility to pre-select indicators based on various criteria. So such a table shows us three indicators. And of course, this is example how they could be presented by the indicator selector tool. So in the third row, you have exact KPI. For example, let's take number of pedestrians injured in all accidents, but it could be also linked with the area of thematic area, which is walking. In that case, it would be also in, you can also type it by safety. And of course, decrease in number of accidents involving pedestrians could be objective because we know and cities gave us an expectation that KPIs should link with concrete objectives. And example of target, unit of measure, and then there is a division whether it is relevant or very relevant for very small city, medium city. Of course, it is working version of table. At the end, it is planned to be a dashboard with better outlook and presentation. Then you can find also level of indicator, whether it is output, result, or impact, and what data is required to fill the KPI in. This is extremely important, as we found from different discussions, workshops with our cities and cross-border advisory group, that in many cases we should display required data because, of course, mainly it is always discussion about data accessibility. Such indicator selector tool, of course, is a big tool. So currently, as I said, indicator selector tool includes more than 140 KPIs, and each KPI is described through the elements like objective, name, example of a target, unit of measure, whether it is relevant for different size of the city, level of indicator, and data which is required. So by navigating even today, it is, in my opinion, quite easy, but of course we want to simplify the use of indicators. So at the end, dashboard is going to cover typical Excel layout, and we believe that this tool would be supportive to cities when they would like to discuss about particular indicators. Another element which we are developing, of course, this, and by the way, during discussion, we found that there are some indicators that we should expand, that their description should be expanded. And we proposed 20, initially 18 indicators. The number was increased to 20. So we extended description of indicator. We explained why this indicator could be essential. And we also explained of what problems may occur in the process of calculating the indicator. In several cities, especially in small towns, the daily reality is that officers are responsible for many tasks. And it is sometimes very frustrating to learn new skills on completely new topic. But at the end, the database supported by expert could be solution. That's why we launched this extended description of several KPIs. And of course, I don't want to go through all KPIs, but I am going to show you the one KPI, average number of walking trips per person. And this is structured, I would say, discussion about this indicator. This indicator contains a vast description. It is also, in my opinion, deeply explained why is this indicator important and what problems or challenges may occur in the process of calculating the indicator. I think it is quite honest approach, and it shows clearly what city could expect from particular indicator. Of course, we prioritize those indicators, and there are only 20 out of 143. But maybe we are still before final validation by cross-border advisory group, and maybe there will be suggestion to expand this list of prioritized indicators. And our second tool, monitoring evaluation plan template. The monitoring evaluation plan template, in our opinion, should be a tool enabling careful navigation in the quite risky, also politically risky topic of monitoring evaluation. I think that during Jewle project partner meeting, it was very useful because presentation of one of local politicians show us that they also had to be taken into account in a serious way. So local politicians' requirements, expectations should also form part of monitoring evaluation, because finally they make final decision making. They are most important in the decision making process because they have to approve from the political side in democratic systems. But of course, monitoring evaluation should work for planners and mobility experts, and also it should require or fulfill, it should fulfill 20 requirements. So this, I would say that framework for monitoring evaluation today is much complex than I expected when we prepared our project more than 2 years ago. And of course, there is always searching for a compromise or searching for an optimum between very detailed approach and the feasibility of the document. Of course, we would like to have our data accurate, complete, delivered on time, consistent, reliable, correct, available, relevant. But of course, we face several barriers in data availability. In many cases, we have to use available data instead of desired. We have to use data sometimes without knowledge of the methodology. You have just what you have. We have to rely on outdated data, in many cases on modal split. We fail to update data because of, despite significant events like pandemics or war in Ukraine. And sometimes we have to use partial data that cannot be generalized to the entire population. So this is always game between, I would say, left and right part of this slide. And I am very happy that I also use this this picture that Morgan already presented, because we identified that sustainable urban mobility planning process is strongly linked to monitoring and evaluation. And I think that at the final stage of first activities, preparation analysis, when we provide diagnosis, then we should already have an idea or even set of initially prioritized indicators. And going further with those process, we see that in many cases and on many steps and levels, monitoring evaluation is very important. So what is the logic of our monitoring evaluation plan framework? We divided it into four big elements, like introduction, then reflection on the current monitoring evaluation practices, on setting targets and indicators, and finally on monitoring and evaluation procedures. So such a template should be more like a self-check document for cities that are going to prepare a monitoring and evaluation scheme. Here I would like to show you selected elements of monitoring evaluation plan, reflection on the current monitoring evaluation practices. It is organized in boxes. Initially you have explanation how to use this chapter or how it could be prepared, and then we have to answer on certain questions. Sometimes maybe not in a formal way, but there are self-checking questions. Do you have a monitoring and evaluation process in place? Are there people or units responsible for collecting and reviewing mobility data? Do you regularly collect data? Do you use this data to guide decisions and update strategies, and so on and so on? On the other hand, one of the most important for us and and challenging parts of monitoring evaluation plan we found was transforming monitoring evaluation framework into political decision-making process. So to ensure that monitoring and evaluation support the decision-making process. So several questions could be raised before we start delivering indicators and collecting data, because we know that some indicators could be focused on topics that are politically or socially sensitive. For example, parking, road space allocation. It is in many cases political debate. So we should be also, and urban planners, decision makers should be aware of that. So summary. Instead of summary, we would like to show you common mistakes in developing the monitoring evaluation for sustainable urban mobility, which is exactly why do we need monitoring evaluation plan and indicator selector tool. First of all, what we found going across many strategic documents on sustainable urban mobility, cities tend to have too many indicators. Of course, urban planners and authors of those documents are very ambitious, but of course it overcomplicates the framework and hinders practical evaluation. In many cases, overlie complex indicators which are very difficult to measure and to interpret. Also, indicators are not aligned with objectives. That's why our indicator selector tool is linked to objectives, let's say default objectives sometimes, but they give an idea how to link particular indicator with objective of the document. There is no baseline reference. In many cases, cities are developing or setting unrealistic target values. In many cases, cities are monitoring irrelevant issues. There could be lack of indicator prioritization, ignoring existing strategic documents, inconsistent methodologies, undefined responsibilities, unclear measurement intervals, and insufficient collaboration. Thank you very much, and thank you to my colleagues from SUMS for BSR Consortium for constant support and development. It is also a result of your big job and your involvement. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marcin, for your detailed presentation. And before we move on, I will take one question that is already answered in the Q&A box by Morgan. There is a question from Stefan from Rostock about the EU's or the TEN-T indicators and the timeline. Should those be published in 2025? And Morgan has answered this question that there will be a delay again. They were planned to be published by July this year, but they are further postponed, and there will be a public consultation around the indicators coming up soon. So just wanted to take this as there was an answer already. Now it's time to move on. And our next speakers will tell about their experiences from the city perspective. Both cities have been part of co-developing this M&E framework that Marcin was introducing you. And also both cities have been testing new methods for collecting data on active mobility. And first, we will hear experiences from a small Latvian town called Cēsis. And Madara Janerte is the head of development department in Cēsis municipality. And she will share with us insights into developing the local level monitoring and evaluation processes in a small town setting. You're welcome, Madara.
So hello everyone. I think my presentation will be kind of a case of what Marcin just presented, and I will. Do you currently see my screen? Not yet.
Not yet.
But now you see.
Yes.
So my name is really Madara Janerte, and I really do work for the Cēsis municipality yet. I have a small confession to make. I'm not really a mobility planner or expert as it was advertised in initial program. I'm an architect and a spatial planner by background, and currently I lead the development administration in the town of Cēsis. But in small municipalities, we all have to improvise a bit, as probably many of you know. And I think my Latvian colleagues who are listening, at least Latvian colleagues, know the old 90s show where there was this main character who had this superpower to gain expertise in different fields very, very quickly. So sometimes that's how I feel working at a municipality. And if someone asks me, "Are you a doctor?" I have to say, "I am today." So if you ask me if I'm a mobility expert, yes, I'm happy to be one today. And honestly, that's also what keeps small cities alive. The spirit of it, that we have to learn fast, adapt very quickly, and somehow we manage to get things done. But jokes aside, Cēsis is really a small historic town, small by European standards, maybe middle-sized by compared to many Latvian towns. It's located in the Vidzeme region, which is northern part of Latvia, and it has around 16,000 residents in the town, and about 40,000 in the whole rural area. The whole municipality is a little bit bigger. It's within Gauja National Park, so it's really beautiful, green, and very popular with tourists, as it has a really nice historical core, and the city center is really nice, as you see in the picture. The city is very compact and very walkable. You can easily walk in 30 minutes from anywhere in Cēsis to the city center, but still, as many small cities in Latvia, it's heavily car dependent. And reasons for this car dependencies are also quite clear. First of all, our public transport is not very well developed, but at least it does exist. We have city bus system, and the hills, since the historical center is located on top of the hill makes cycling, if it's not electric bike, it makes it as a really good exercise. And on weekends, even though we have a really great regional link, the railway, we also get extra pressure from tourists, from visitors that are driving from other cities to Cesis, and also from our rural area to attend different services. So Cesis doesn't really have a sustainable urban mobility plan yet, but our strategic goals are still quite clear. They're written in several local planning documents. We have the development program, the sustainable development strategy, and also the climate action plan, or SICAP. And all of them highlight the same things. We have to reduce car use, cut CO2 emissions, create more options for walking, cycling, and public transport, and eventually be climate neutral. But let's be honest, strategies are just words unless we can measure what is really changing. And that's where monitoring and evaluation comes in. And that's why it has become important to us to see if our ideas that we have expressed in those strategies actually work, and are we making any progress. And one small but very interesting experience with data-based decisions we did quite recently came a few summers ago. We wanted to test closing one of actually the main street in our city, historical center of the city. We wanted to close it for the cars on the weekends. But we needed data because there were local shop owners who argued that cars bring them money. So we installed simple traffic counters who could read the numbers of the cars, and we actually gained really, really good data. And the numbers were really clear that most of the cars that were passing along the street were just cutting through the historical center, using it as a shortcut, and in fact not bringing any money to local economy. That gave us the confidence to act, and we actually closed the street for the cars on the weekends, making it a summer street. We have done it in third year in a row this year already. And even the NGO Pilsēt cilvēkiem, which can translate as a city for people, named after the Jan Gehl book, City for People. And they are usually really, really critical of municipalities in Latvia, especially Riga. They praised Cesis for this database decisions last week at the Med City conference I was also attending. So even the skeptics were kind of convinced. But in this Sum for BSR project, we realized that we need more data, and more data about active mobility all year round, and in different locations, not just one-time counts. So during our planning project, we installed more AI-based counters, but the technology had evolved. And those AI-based cameras could already count and recognize between pedestrians, cyclists, cars, and so on. Now we can see exactly how the city is moving hour by hour, season by season. The data shows the trends, how cycling grows in spring and how pedestrian flows change when there's some bigger event in our town. But of course, the success comes with new challenges, because now we have so much data that the real problem is how to understand the data, how to analyze and how to visualize the data so that it could be base for good decisions. And so we submitted this as a challenge to Smart City Finest program, and you are very welcome. I'm advertising that you're welcome to vote for this challenge, because probably also other smaller towns have similar problem, that we have a lot of data from those traffic counters, and we also have a lot of data from our public transport validation system. But since we do not really have a data analyst department at our municipality, it's really hard for us to make any conclusions and decisions out of those data. So we are also part of Interreg Intermod project that focused on improving our public transport, and so this project is about improving public transport and making it more efficient. And I want to state that those collaborations are very, very important to us, because small cities like Cēsis don't have big research teams or data units. And working with international partners in some for BSR project, as well as Interreg Intermod or possibly Smart City, experts brings us tools that we can't really create by ourselves. And all these experiences made us kind of rethink what monitoring and evaluation really means to us. And it's not just about indicators or about frameworks, it's about learning by doing, seeing what works but really doesn't, and adjusting accordingly. For us, it's not really a formality, it's how we stay accountable. It connects our small local steps or our data counting to bigger European goals that are connected to our local strategies on climate, energy, sustainable mobility. And also it helps to somehow show our decisions that our decisions are based on facts, and it helps to convince people if people see that we have the data that kind of makes it more trustable. It helps to build trust from local community as well. But it's not always easy. In Latvia, only bigger cities that are on the TNT network and considered urban nodes are required to have a sustainable urban mobility planning by 2027. And Cēsis is a small town, and it's not one of them. So everything we do in this field is kind of voluntary. It's driven by our interests, not by EU or local regulations. Right now, we are developing a transport development plan as a part of our territorial planning framework, but national regulations only focus on infrastructure planning, not so much on sustainable mobility or behavioral change as this project. So we are trying to bring that human dimension into planning, and we are doing it because we want, but not because we are required to. And as you see, our measuring and evaluation practices is still in progress, and it's more a process, not a result. We see a huge potential in geographic information system integration for data visualization. But of course, we have some traffic counts and also public transport data, but they are not very well integrated yet. And during the SAM for BSR project, we have decided or in the process of deciding on our local M&E indicators. And for us, it's really important to keep things simple. We are looking mainly at 3 areas: walking, cycling, and public transport. And right now we know that we cannot really measure everything exactly. We don't have the capacity, but we could start by tracking really simple indicators that we already have data of, either on national level, or they are can be easily gained from GIS data, or easily counted. For instance, we could simply calculate the length of the cycling lanes or public transport ridership, and so on. These indicators were suggested by our SAMP experts, and we will adapt them as we go, because they help us understand if we have made any progress with our strategic planning goals. And also regarding the processes within municipality on paper, it could be very clear that we have our road department. Road engineers could do the traffic counts. Our public transport operator already has the ridership data. So but the planning department could, in our department, our development administration could do the coordination. Environmental department could count the emissions. But reality is a lot more complicated. We don't really have a dedicated staff or position or budget for monitoring and evaluation. And right now it's more about our people at the municipality collaborating because they care, not because their job description says so. It's not perfect, but it's how it is in small cities. Step by step, we are trying to build this culture that values data and values learning. So what other small cities could learn from our situation, from CESIS? First, to start small and measure what matters to us, like we did with our summer street. Second, turn data into dialogue, use data to communicate with the society, and so it turns into meaningful dialogue. Third, work with the others, with the experts through Interreg, Smart City, and so on, because the collaboration helps to fill the gaps that small municipalities have, the capacity gaps. And finally, what we are trying to do is build a culture of learning, not just following the regulations. And then even a small city like we are can lead by example. And if we are brave enough to experiment, to make a summer street experiment, or to experiment with data counting, and that's exactly what we are trying to do in CESIS. And in the photograph, you see one other experiment which proved to be quite successful. We during Mobility Week. We experiment with our politicians, and majority of the local politicians are seen on the bikes in the photograph in this slide. Along with the colleagues, I'm also in this photograph wearing a helmet. So thank you very much, and hopefully see you in CESIS in summer someday, when our main street, Riga Street, is closed for traffic and everything is really nice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madara. I think this was an excellent key takeaways for the other small cities, and excellent example of like realistic and resource efficient actions and data-driven planning. Thank you so much. Now we will move on, and it's time for another interesting example, and we will hear from project coordinator Oona Uusitalo from City of Turku, how Turku is testing new ways to collect data on active modes, and what lessons have been learned through piloting a small-scale mobility hub and some citizen panel. You're welcome, Oona.
Thank you, Ira. Let's share my presentation here. Okay, so I'm Oona Ustalo from City of Turku, and today we'll be looking into these measures we have done in the city and how they can be used to collect information and better our SUMP. For example, some background to the city of Turku is that we are located in southern Finland. We have about 200,000 inhabitants. The city is the oldest city in Finland, and we are also a university city. We have several universities here, and that means that we have quite a lot of students living in the city. The city is quite car dependent, and that has led to some of our goals for the city. We are aiming to be carbon neutral by 2029, and mobility sector is one of the sectors that needs currently most work on to achieve this. And we are also aiming to increase the share of active modes used within the city by 2030 to 66%, and currently that percentage is about 55%. Okay, so what has been done in Turku? So City of Turku's SUMP finished in late 2024, and we did some engaging of citizens, decision makings, and businesses separately. They were heard during the process, especially in the final steps. There was a questionnaire to hear each group's opinion on what should be prioritized most in the SUMP outcome. And we have in this SAMS for BSR project established this SUMP panel that is answering some of the questions we have towards the citizens. We have also launched our first mobility hub in spring 2025, and it brings together current mobility services in the city. So let's start with the SUMP panel. It is representative panel, so we mapped out all kinds of organizations in the city and tried to make this good combination that covers several groups of people to make it very inclusive and get several points of views integrated into the panel. And we've been quite successful with it. There were some organizations that weren't really excited in joining this kind of a city-led panel, but luckily we got a bunch of volunteers joining in. And the purpose of this meeting is that we will get expert of a specific topic and put them together with the citizens, and they can experience new things and have discussion together. So how does it work? So this year we have planned 5 panel meetings, and we have already had 4 of them. And all of the topics of the meetings are related to the SUMP we have. And we have, for example, had meetings on the walking and the walking environment of the city. And for example, the new trunk line network that launched this summer. So it was, it had been operation for like month and a half or so before we had the meeting, so people had the chance to get to know it themselves as well. And the meetings start by getting to know the topic hands-on. That means going to visit some place or testing out some service. So each panelist has their own personal experience with the topic. Then we return to the office where we continue the meeting. There might be a presentation on the topic in more detail if it's needed. And then there will be some discussion afterwards where everyone can state their opinions, and experts can also pose questions to the panel members. All of this discussion is documented and then turned into a report. And these reports will be collected and used as additional help when our SUMP will be modified in the future. And of course, if there's some urgent topics that were brought up, those will be addressed fast. And some like perk we noticed here in the panel is that also as different city officials and experts have been in the meetings, they have also found some nice ideas through the discussion on how they could do something maybe together and improve the city even further. And generally, I have gotten very great feedback here on the panel meetings from both sides. So experts and citizens both have really enjoyed these meetings. They get lots of information, they will get heard, they can share their experiences. So it's been very beneficial to everybody. And here in the picture, you can also see like we did this tour, checking the city's walking conditions within this route, and it took like about an hour, I'd say, and we visited several like difficult spots and good spots around the city center and heard the opinion of the panelists. Then here's the mobility hub. It can be seen in the picture. That is done in this project, Sams for BSR, and it is located in Pääskyvari district. The area has high car ownership, which is related to the car dependency problem we have in the city, and they also have lots of families in the area. So it's been interesting place to pilot Mobility Hub in. Mobility Hub brings together the current services in the city, meaning Föllari city bikes, rentable e-cargo bikes, and also a bus stop that connects to the trunk line network I mentioned before. And there's also some information provided in the signage there about the services and how to use them. So previously, before this Mobility Hub, this area didn't have as large coverage of the city bike system, so it has increased the amount of stations in the area, and also previously the e-cargo bike system didn't exist there. So we have brought it, like expanded the service to the neighborhood. And we have been following the use of the Mobility Hub through the usage of services. So we've been following the data showing how many people use the bus and how many bike rentals have been made at the hub, for example. And we have noted that especially the city bikes have been very popular there, and that has already led to us prioritizing the Mobility Hub higher in the prioritization of the city bikes and increasing the bike numbers, because they were always running low on bikes, so we had to make sure that there's enough capacity there. We've been collecting user feedback through a survey. It's linked to the signage at the Mobility Hub, and we've also been attending local events to discuss with people and also encourage them to answer the survey. And the next steps for the Mobility Hub is that we have planned to use these measuring devices around the Mobility Hub area that would measure pedestrians, cyclists, and e-scooters in the area, and that will give us more information on how many people are moving in the surrounding areas. Another device will also be installed to this pedestrian and cycling bridge close to the city center. And the user feedback we get through the discussions and also through the survey will be taken into account when creating next mobility hubs. And we have noted that, for example, people are wanting more bicycle parking and bike washing point to mobility hubs, and also more e-cargo bikes, and also bringing e-city bikes to the city, which we don't currently have. And according to the survey, the presence of Mobility Hub reduced the use of car by 55% of the respondents said this, and it has also replaced the use of their private owned bikes, as they have used the city bike instead. When looking into the bigger picture here and how this feeds into the monitoring of urban mobility, is that we have been able to improve the citizen engagement for the city through the SUMP panel, and also doing this questionnaire for the Mobility Hub gives us information about the district itself, and it's not like just in the whole city scale. We have also gotten data-driven inclusion decision-making tools here. We have gotten opinions from the citizens that can be used when, for example, prioritizing the measures in the SUMP. We have gotten ideas to adapt the planning, for example, with the Mobility Hub prioritization, and as a whole, all this information from these measures can be used to support the update of the SUMP to make it even better and more easy to follow. And then all of the evaluation can be based on some kind of data, and we don't need to be guessing things, for example, when we have this qualitative data and also some qualitative as well. That was my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Oona. I think this gives us good examples on how these different small-scale tests of collecting data can be pieces of a bigger puzzle in monitoring. I can see that time is running very fast, but I have one more very interesting piece of news to share with you. As led by the UBC Sustainable Cities Commission and together with all the project partners in the SAMSO BSR project, we will be organizing a training program for local authorities on sustainable urban mobility planning topics starting in January next year. And we have a very experienced expert team from Lithuania, from consultancy Gaučerko, that will be supporting us in planning and providing the trainings. And before I give the word to Senior Engineer Monika Parafinaitite-Ray from Gaučerko, I will share you some key information about our trainings. So we will organize a free 5-module online training program on the SUMP topics that is designed especially for the small and mid-sized cities, for the mobility planners and experts in the small and mid-sized cities throughout the Baltic Sea region, but it is open for basically anyone interested in our topics. And we hope that it especially supports those that are in the beginning of their SUMP process or considering it as a strategic tool. And the training program will consist of 5 modules, each of which includes a webinar to introduce the key concepts and spark ideas, engaging workshop for peer-to-peer learning and solving real-world challenges together, as well as some independent learning materials to prepare for the webinar workshops and deepen understanding. And all of the training materials, including the recordings, will be made available at the Baltic Sea Region SUMP Competence Center website, for which the address is there. And here you can find the timetable for the trainings, also available at our website. The webinars and workshops will span from January until May, and everyone can pick the events that they freely based on their needs. So no need to think of it as a program that you need to participate in everything, but pick those that are most interesting to you. We will begin with the basic principles and key concepts of SUMP process and move on to setting up the monitoring and evaluation framework and defining indicators based on the work presented by Marcin, to collecting data for active modes based on some case examples from our cities, experimenting with potential mobility solutions to promote active modes, and finally to engaging stakeholders in planning mobility measures and sustainable urban mobility planning. We will also organize a SUMP clinic offering tailored support to 10 selected cities with a special focus on the small and mid-sized cities. And the cities will be selected through an open application process. And each of these selected cities will get 2 individual consultation meetings online with our SUMP experts from Gaučerko, and as a result, each city receives a personalized roadmap with some expert recommendations outlining the future actions to their local challenges that have been defined in the application process and during the online meetings. But now I have the pleasure to introduce you Senior Engineer Monika Parafinaitite-Ray from Gaučerko, who will be one of the key trainers of our training program and one of the SUMP clinic's experts. So Welcome
Hello,
to Crete.
everyone. Thank you for inviting me today. First, I would really like to apologize. We do have emergency siren testing in the city, so you might hear some sirens. I hope they're not going to disturb you listening. So I am Monica Porfinititare. I'm a mobility specialist at GSE Gauss&Co. And our company's role in the training is the delivery of several training modules, which do cover the some planning principles and process. The module is also going to be very focused on the SUMP planning for especially small and medium-sized cities, how that differs from the bigger cities. And we will also contribute to module 2 that focuses on basic principles of monitoring and evaluation framework, as well as mobility indicators. And the last module, module 5, will be on stakeholder engagement, stressing the importance of involving the stakeholders throughout all SUMP process and the effective ways how to do that. And my role in these trainings will be the creating the content that includes teaching material, also collecting useful sources for independent learning that participants could use afterwards, as well as designing the exercises for training participants to practice what they have learned in theory, and also that will hopefully be useful in their further work planning and developing sustainable urban mobility plan. So I would really like to kindly invite all the cities that are developing, updating, or planning to develop their first SUMP to join the trainings. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are very excited that this will begin. And I hope that many of you got interested in the SUMP clinic and our training program. And you can find all the information, the registration and application forms at the Baltic Sea Region SEMP Competence Center website. And there you can already indicate your interest for the trainings with the registration form. And we will keep you updated on the full agendas as they are finalized. And the call for applications for the SEMP clinic will open 30th of October, so in this month, and close on 30th of January next year. So I hope that I'll see many of you in our trainings and that you will join us on the journey towards sustainable urban mobility. And now it's time for the Q&A. We have only a couple of minutes left. And I saw that there were some questions in the chat that I'd like to take. If I just can find the Q&A box now. Here is one question from Maija Rusanen about monitoring and evaluation. Monitoring and evaluation might be quite time-consuming and complex procedure that is sometimes challenging even for the bigger cities. What recommendation would you give for the small city, for example, preparing their first mobility plan with very limited resources, where to start from? And I think this is for Martin. Is Martin still there? If anyone else has an answer to this question, you can shoot, or then we go on to the next one. Seems that Martin is not there yet anymore. There's a question to Thesis, to Madara. Did retailers' attitudes change after establishing summer streets? Initially, they featured declining sales. Did sales during summer streets time even increase?
Well, I will maybe try to answer this first question that was dedicated to Martin as well, because I kind of have an answer, and my presentation was mainly about mainly the answer to this question. I think what Martin always suggests is that to start as simple as possible. The simpler the indicators are, the better. And sometimes you have to you can have very good monitoring with the data you already have. You just have to collect what you have and evaluate what you already know. So that's maybe for small cities the only way to go. But regarding the Summer Street, some of the retailers probably will never change their mind, but the number or the percentage of them is declining by each year. And we have kind of also adjusted a little bit in the process that currently, for instance, in the Saturday morning when there's a market time in Cesis, we do not close the traffic as we did for first year, so it's accessible also for the cars. And then in the afternoon it's closed when the cafeterias are open, and generally the sales for the cafeterias did increase, in fact, and they are very much in favor of that and really like the project. And also that our cultural department organize different events to support this Summer Street program, because it brings more customers also to local businesses. So generally, I think not only data, but the project itself did convince majority of the retailers. Okay, thank you for the question.
Thank you so much for answering both the questions. So keep it simple. It's the key takeaway. Okay, I think I can see that we are running out of time, so it has come the time to thank everyone. Thank you for all our speakers. Thank you all for joining, and welcome back for the next webinar, that is UBC Talks about climate budget concept and tools, taking place on 2nd of December at the same time. Thank you for joining and have a good day.